You're listening to the Dibbly-Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. But first of all, Jenny, as I do with all my guests, I like to take them back to when they first got into cricket. And it's been very fascinating listening to people's memories on how they got started into cricket, Jenny. So let's go back to the very beginning, Jenny, growing up, which is a very long time. What were your earliest memories of watching, playing, and even going to the cricket? And who were some of the cricketing idols that you looked up to growing up?
Well, cricket was omnipresent in my family. It's very much our family sport. And my earliest memory is going around the painted boundary line while my mum was watching my dad playing and saying to my mum, I can't find the end. And she'd sent me off on one of these apprentices' missions because she just wanted 5 minutes to watch the game. And she kept saying, no, it's there, just keep going. So I did many laps and couldn't find the end of the line. So in the end, it quickly occurred to me when I'd go round to my both sets of grandparents' houses and cricket was on there, on the telly, cricket was on at home, cricket was everywhere, that I had to play myself, particularly because my brother had got me to be a backyard bowler so he could practice his batting. I had no concept that women played cricket at that time, and it was one of the most brilliant days of my life when I was 11 at school. Our year cricket teacher for the boys, who was also a woodwork teacher, Colin Dunkley, he was also Lancs under-19 coach, and he said to me, oh, I saw you bowling there, warming the guys up who were batting. I want you to come and play in the team. And I got to play cricket at school alongside the boys, and it was a dream come true. And then a year later, my mum spotted in the paper that women's cricket was setting up in our area, and it was like going down the rabbit hole because I had no idea that it existed because, of course, there was no visibility in the media whatsoever. And this was the early 90s. And if you knew anything about women's cricket, the only thing you'd ever heard was Rachel Hayhoe Flint, which was 20 years earlier. So there was no idea that cricket still existed. And then I got into a bit of a pathway. And I was so lucky to have those opportunities with cricket, something that I'd never, ever considered that could be a possibility, particularly not when I was in primary school.
Yeah, that's great to hear that early introduction into the game, Jenny. Any cricketing idols that you admired?
Well, that's an interesting topic, because these days, of course, you can have many female cricketing idols, and it would have been lovely to have grown up in that era, but that wasn't obviously a thing in my time. But my birth county is Cheshire, who have actually been quite a force in women's cricket, but for the men's cricket, I'd go down with my granddad and we'd go to Old Trafford. So we had, in those days, Mike Watkinson was the captain. Michael Atherton would play occasionally when he wasn't playing for England. So we had a lot of local heroes. Wasim Akram played at Lancashire. He was my favourite overseas player, and of course he's bowling. But the amount of times he dug us out of a hole to win a one-dayer with his batting was incredible. And just the charisma of him playing, so amazing. In the Fast Bowlers Club, I used to try, like, you can imagine what most teenage girls are doing. Not me. I was trying to bowl like Merv Hughes. He was my idol with bowling. Obviously, Shane Warne, like, who can't love him? And in the fielding stakes, I mean, I'm not that coordinated, but John T. Rhodes, what a fielder. And also what he showed is you know, you see it now with someone like Labuschagne, the power of just application, just keeping on, doing your drills. And that's when you know, ally with your natural talent and you become the genius. So I would say they were my idols.
Yeah, pretty good idols to look up to. How would you describe yourself as a cricketer?
Well, in sort of technically, I used to be more of a bowler who bats. These days, I'm a batter who bowls. But only recently, I tried out keeping for the first time, which happened to be in Norway. Very unexpected situation. And I really loved keeping. And then I was talking with Mum about it, and she said, "Oh, I used to be a keeper." And this was complete news to me, but I did know that her dad was a keeper, and he also was a smoker, and he was also very comedy unintentionally. And one time he dived and his matches were in his pocket and he set his trousers on fire. So whenever I think about my granddad playing cricket, I think of that. So I think I would have loved to have been a keeper as well, but you can't do everything.
No. But I suppose you have to try at least everything once. Bat, bowl,
of course.
In the game. You know,
and in life.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm. And in life, you got to try everything once in life. Yeah.
Right. You know, life's too short. Why not? You know, give it a go. You may not be good at it, but at least you had fun and you gave it a red hot crack. So that was good to hear. Sorry. And
you always learn something from everything. Oftentimes I'll look at something and can't understand why people are into it. Then you have a go and you're like, well, it might not be for me, but I kind of understand why you do it now, you know. I always like trying things for that reason.
Yeah, there's a science behind it, a particular science behind everything that we do in life, and also in cricket, in terms of batting technique, bowling action, fielding, even wicket keeping technique as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. So you're still involved in cricket, obviously. You're still involved in cricket. You still play cricket now. Tell us about, you know, playing cricket now, not much later in life, but, you know, as you get older and the years go by. Just describe, how's it been playing cricket in this sort of time for you?
Well, I actually had a decade out of cricket because I was so immersed in it, I burnt out. So I was an assistant editor at Cricinfo, and then I was playing, and then every conversation in my life ever was about cricket. So I just needed a break, and that break happened to be 10 years. And then a couple of years ago, I got back into playing, and it was a whole new world in terms of now it's 2020, everything's 2020, and also just the general landscape for women's cricket is so much better. But in terms of playing as an older player, well, I always look at Jimmy as a great example. I tell you what, this time round, I'm fitter and I'm actually strong as well. I never did any strength and conditioning back in the day because it wasn't a thing. So I've got a lot better balance now because I'm strong. I can bowl faster. My dad has watched me play a lot recently. He said you're a lot better player now than you were, you know, back when you were, if you want to say in inverted commas, successful. So that's been interesting. But also, I really apply a growth mindset to everything that I do. So for me, this tour, or even if I wasn't on tour, but I think there's always something to learn. So in Brazil, I learned reverse sweeping, which was something that has not been in my armor before. Like I said, in Norway, I was keeping for the first time, and also they had a fast bowling masterclass on while I was there with the opening bowler for Norway, Vinay. And I said to him, I've got quite technically a good action, but my follow through is non-existent. So we fixed that. So that's a really cool thing about cricket, is there's always something to learn and you can always improve. And this year I want to try doing the ramp shot. And also, even though I'm a qualified coach, I qualified so long ago that we weren't taught how to teach a sliding stop in fielding. Yeah. That just did not exist. And then I've never had that teaching either. So I'm very keen for that. I'm actually going to make a note now so I can do that on my tour this year, sliding stop.
Yeah, it is just, you left the game for 10 years and you come back and everything's changed, even coaching. It's changed from 20 years ago.
I know, but I love that, right? Because cricket has to evolve to survive, to thrive. So we're seeing that, and it's exciting. Like we were talking before that we're both quite traditionalist and old school, but, we have to embrace change at the same time. It's just that balance, isn't it?
Yes, it is. You're going to try and replicate Joe Root's ramp shot that he plays, Jenny?
Just any ramp shot would be good. I wouldn't put myself up at Joe Root level, but it would just be interesting to see if I could do it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Any particular memory that sticks out for you in your time playing cricket that you look back and say that was a pretty cool time? Any moment that sticks out in your head when it comes to that?
Well, I did play some England under 21, some England under 17. I was with the cohort that went on to win the 2009 World Cup. So, Charlotte Edwards, I played with Laura McLeod. Actually captained her at county once or twice. I was British Unis North captain, and in that team, that was really, really cool. But you know what? I never went on a cricket tour overseas, and it was something that I always wanted to do. So I've always had that at the back of my mind. When I was at Cricinfo, we had a global editorial conference in Goa, and we had India versus the rest of the world, and they appointed me captain of rest of the world. So I captained Greg Chappell, which was really cool when he was coaching India. And I also hit Warney for 4. That's one of my favourite cricketing memories. And then he didn't like it, so he bowled me 3 times in succession because he's Shane Warne and that's what he can do. But I just love that he cared, because I'm pretty much no one. And he didn't like being hit for 4 by a woman who he had assumed could not play cricket because I was female, because we went out into the middle at the Rose Bowl and I picked up my bat and he said, "Oh, can you play?" I said, "Well, did you think I couldn't because I'm female?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, let's see." And then he did bowl me a really slow full toss and he didn't have any socks or shoes on. But that's not the point. I still hit him through square for my favourite pull shot before.
Yeah. Oh, incredible memory. And obviously, he's no longer with us, Warney. Sadly passed away a few years ago. Obviously, so many people were touched by him in his performances. Obviously, I met him, as we talked about before we started this interview. And as you can see behind me, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the poster he signed of his book, which was a great moment for me. And that will probably be my most happiest cricket memory of meeting him in my entire life. So I can relate to, when you meet your idols or you meet particular players that you looked up to and say, wow, I can't believe that he's actually, in your case, he was bowling to you. He didn't bowl you a flipper by any chance, did he?
He just bowled one which went right past me. I was like, "What was that?" He said, "Well, that was the wrong gun." I was like, "Okay, I'm completely mesmerized." But I just do want to say that, you mentioned he sort of touch lots of people on the pitch, but off the pitch, I mean, you've met him, so you would understand his charisma, but the several times that I got to meet him, I was just so impressed with him as a human being. He had time for every single person. Journalists you could ask him any question, he'd answer it you dead in the eye. He'd think about it. I don't know how he created this time for himself. It's almost like he lived 10 lives in his short life. And I remember one time at the Oval, when he was captaining Hampshire, and it was a cold day. Hants were having a terrible session, and all he wanted to do was trudge off the pitch at tea, have a smoke, put his feet up, just forget really the session. And there were a clamour of kids waiting for him on the stairs, and he sort of trudged off, and then he looked at them when he saw them, and his demeanour completely changed. He was like, "Hey kids, how are you?" And he had all the time in the world for every single person. And as I've gone round, I've spoken to lots of people who were fortunate enough to meet him, and everybody tells such a similar story. What a man! He was beyond. I mean, you can't be beyond unique, but he was unique. I've never seen anyone as magnetic as that, or just what a man.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He was so kind and warm, that warmth that you felt from him. And when I met him, I was very nervous, and he said, "Don't be nervous, mate." And we had a chat, and it was great. He's just a wonderful human being, sadly taken too early from us, but he provided those great memories that will live on in our lives forever.
That's right.
Which is wonderful. You have mentioned it, Jenny, that you were a journalist, of course, for ESPN Cricket, covering women's cricket, and then you're going to find yourself branching into becoming an author, writing a book, because you're going to be recounting your cricket tour, which is going to be a very long book indeed. It's going to be very big, and it's going to have many chapters. So you're going to branch out into being an author as well. But why did you choose to go into journalism, Jenny? What made you want to go from that field?
I've always loved stories and people. I'm fascinated by human behaviour, and with cricket being a real specialist subject, and also the sport of any with the best stories, I thought it wasn't even a question of whether I was going to do it. It was just, that's what I was going to do. So from when I was 14, I was writing match reports for the local paper. And then when I got to Cricinfo, I covered extensively men's cricket, but also women's cricket. So I was actually the first woman in the world to do the ball-by-ball online commentary for test matches, which remains a massive honour, and I'm very, very passionate about women's representation in the media across all forms of, I mean, we can come back onto this, but, particularly in sports media. And, in my case and most others, it certainly was not tokenism, because I've got a very extensive background in the game. As at that point, I'd done lots of interviews and experience, and I qualified as a journalist on top of my English degree, but also I had the playing pedigree.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear how you got into that. Are there any favourite cricket books or that you've read to get inspiration, because you're going to be writing your own book? And what's been your favourite interview in terms of interviewing a player in your time? So if you can answer that.
Okay, so when it comes to the books, again, I'm super passionate in that. I realised not that long ago there are more books on Bradman than there are on the entirety of women's cricket. I mean, that is quite an astonishing and actually quite disgusting stat, which is an indictment, if you ask me, on the publishing industry and the lack of support traditionally for women's cricket in the media, and then the lack of investment, and it's been an awful vicious circle. So in that respect, I have enjoyed cricket books, the well-written ones on women's cricket history. So Rachel Hayhoe, as she was at the time, certainly wrote one or two excellent books, one about herself and one about cricket in general. It was very interesting. I'm currently catching up on an England women's tour to India book, which at the time was very well received, particularly by those in the touring party, because they told me it's absolutely spot on with what happened. So yeah, that's called Mad Dogs and English Women. I'm not quite sure about that title, never have been, but yeah, for example, Laura McLeod's on that tour, and she told me at the time, and she told me recently, it was so well observed. I'm really enjoying that because, as you can imagine, I love a cricket tour book because I love people, travel, and cricket. And you know, you meet the best people through cricket, and you hear the craziest stories when you're traveling, or you get mixed up in them yourself. So there's some excellent cricket travel books. So Angus Bell, Batting on the Bosphorus, is an incredible book, and I was really fortunate to meet him in Montreal, and he showed me around Montreal cricket. It's an astonishing book. It remains my favourite. Penguins Stop Play, of course, is both brilliant and tragic. Also, Cricket on Everest by my friend Alan Kerr, who's operations manager at Japan Cricket. Disclosure, I edited that book, but that's a really fascinating book about trying to set the world record for playing the world's highest match on Everest, as the title suggests. Alex Blackwell's Fair Game is an astonishing book, and it was very interesting to read the insights into the inside story of what I had supposed was going on from the outside. So yeah, and I think the thing is, there were that many untold stories of women in cricket that with my book, one of my aims is to tell these stories and hopefully have them as a launching pad for books to be written thereon. You spoke to Roberta, her personal story. I stayed with her for a week in Brazil. Her personal story is incredible, particularly, you know, the switch from being a pro golfer to a cricketer, fantastic. Being part of Brazil, giving women contracts ahead of the men, setting a precedent for the world. Absolutely astonishing. My friend Josie Treyas, captain of the Philippines, she's the first domestic helper in the world to lead an international sports team. I stayed with her for a week. This was the second time I'd caught up with her. I started my tour in Hong Kong last year, where she works, and then I went to her home island of Negros in the Philippines in December just gone. And her story, we haven't got, I mean, you know, I'm sure you and I could have lovely discussions that go on for months, but you need about a month just for her story. It's really incredible. And then you asked me another question, and what was it? Because I just went off on
my favourite part of the interview as your time.
My favourite interview. Well, I feel that despite the fact that I've worked professionally in cricket and have done many interesting interviews. And I would think Claire Connors was one when she was just deciding to go into cricket administration, just after the time where the ECB had taken over from the Women's Cricket Association. It was a really, really interesting time. So that was very interesting. And at that time, she was winning the Ashes and driving around her student who was in the team, Holly Colvin. And, it was a totally different time, and we were advocating for professionalism. So that was an interesting time. But I have to say that there's not one particular interview that I can draw on from my tour just to date, but just to tell you, I have met that many inspirational women, and I featured their stories on my socials in a very introductory way so far, but there will be so many more coming. So, for example, the captain or the outgoing captain of Argentina, Vero Vasquez, she's an anaesthetist, a single mom. She's on the board. She's a captain. She's a leader. And she's faced that and continues to face that much prejudice just by playing. And then I just recently spoke with Kerry Tomlinson in New Zealand, who's the captain of the first Maori team to take to the field, which was humbling and emotional to witness. And, what she's done and what she's been a part of, and she's long been an advocate for this, is just incredible. So what I'm saying is I like the stories and it tends to be women, because women tend to face much more disadvantage and structural barriers to playing. So it tends to be the women who, to me, are the most inspirational, because I always think, why do you want to do this? And why do you want to keep fighting? And how inspirational you are to have made all the change that you have. And also, often people say you can't be what you can't see, but I'm not sure I always believe in that. Like, I love role models, that's great, but some people have to be the trailblazers. Some people have to do that. And I have met so many trailblazers so far, and it makes me really excited and inspired. And I think also with my tour, because you can imagine it's quite an undertaking and not the obvious thing to do, and it's so massive and it can be really daunting, that whenever I speak with inspirational women, and I've only told you about the international players, there's many club players who are unreal, who'll be featured in my book as well, but they're my favorite because they give me the fuel and the energy and the inspiration to keep driving forward myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Just wonderful to hear you talking through that, and just being touched by so many people's stories, but also journey as well, because everyone's path into cricket and life is different. So it's wonderful Absolutely. That they have this trust that they've been given to you to tell their story and have that shared with many people around the world. It's just fascinating.
And it's a huge on that is, I feel very, very humbled by it, but also I feel daunted often by the huge responsibility that's been given to me with the trust, but also often I will be the only person telling these stories. So you want to get stories right anyway, but particularly if you're the only one telling them, because it's very much on you to make sure that it's a faithful and accurate depiction. But already I've had so many people come to me and say, thank you so much for giving me a platform to tell my story. Because, you know, I thought, well, I love stories, and I'm having a wonderful time meeting amazing people who are sharing. But it's nice when people come back to me and say, you know, oh, thank you, because we feel seen and we feel heard. And, you know, I just say, well, you know, at the moment it's on my socials and in articles and everything, but I think to put everybody's story in the book is just going to be, I think it's really important to have that document there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be there for years and years to come for people to read. And yeah, I can understand that entirely, that responsibility and wanting to do it right. And it's going to be a big book, that's for sure. It's going to be 1 million probably pages, I think, all the stories.
Well, it's going to be a huge book. It's going to be my personal history interwoven into everything, plus a bit of slapstick, because I am that kind of person who gets myself into situations, particularly traveling. And that's part of it, because as a solo woman traveler, there hasn't been any cricket travel book in that realm, and there's never been a global cricket travel book, so it's going to be quite the unique book. But believe it or not, because I can't certainly speak a short story, but I can definitely, because I've been trained and I have to train myself, I can tell a very punchy story very quickly. So we'll have the highs, the lows, the laughs, the sadnesses. It's just going to be everything. And, you know, I'm very, very excited about this book because I just know what's going to be in it. But I realize I'm so privileged to be in the position to collect all these stories. And again, going round, you know, I've had my tour dismissed as a great jaunt, and to me, it's not a holiday. It's a very serious undertaking of recording everything that's going on in the world at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think everyone, even I'm excited for the book to come out and read it myself, because it's, as you said, it's a personal record of your own journey, but also people's journeys as well in cricket, but also in life in those countries that you've toured and visited. So it's fantastic to hear that, Jenny.
A lot.
Yes. The next question I was going to ask is, I think you touched on it a little bit in terms of females in cricket media, broadcasting and that, but what differences have you noticed from your time in the media covering women's cricket from when you started until now? What are the major differences?
Where do we begin? I guess I can tell you some very stark contrasts in that, for example, the first World 2020 that was jointly held in 2000 in Taunton was the group stages for the women, and I was the world's media. Yeah. And so, for example, I would just say, oh, you know, can I speak to Sarah Taylor, please? And they'd send her to the media box where it was just me. And then, you know, we got to this is such an important story. We got to the semi-final at the Oval, and because it was the double header and because it was London, all the papers had sent their correspondents who wouldn't have seen women's cricket since 1993, probably, because that was probably the last time that they'd had access to it on the television. Yeah. And of course, that was the amateur era. It was 2 and over. It wasn't particularly exciting, but neither could it be when women were not given those opportunities to be professionals. And so it's women's cricket for many years suffered from a lag of understanding, but that lack of understanding itself is understandable. So there we were at the Oval, And the journos knew to wind me up because I was quite reactive in those days. Now I'm just proactive. But anyway, they said to me, Tomo, can the girls hit it off the square? And I could see Karen Moulton coming into bat at that time, and I was playing club cricket with her. And I tell you, I have never heard a ball fizz harder and faster than when I was at the non-striker's end. So I just said, I don't know, shall we see if they can or not? Anyway, she just smoked this six through square. It went flat into the crowds. And I said, I guess women can hit the ball A. And then Claire Taylor came in and masterminded the run chase, which brought England into the final. And that day, I could feel and I could hear the perceptions from the media shift of what women's cricket was. And it was such a watershed moment because that was just the cusp of what was to come. And what I love about that day as well also is that Jared Kimber was in the crowd. This was before he was a professional journalist, and he's talked about that match as the match which made him want to cover women's cricket. So, representation and coverage, it's also important, right? So then I've had my 10 years away from the game. And then I sort of come back 2 years ago. I'm going to an Adelaide Strikers women's match, which, essentially is a domestic cricket match in Australia. Absolutely flooded with cameras and journos and everything. And then that same season when I'd come back to cricket, I was in my cricket club, which had forever been a men's club. It was the first year they had women. And I had a lovely moment when I stood back on the bar and listened to the guys, because it was on the television, and they were appraising the performances in the context of, she's actually having a really good season, but this is a shocker for her. Or I'm surprised she's come to the party today. And I thought, wow, this is how the landscape has changed just in that time. So I was actually invited to go and cover the inaugural WPL last year, but it was kind of at the start of my own tour, and I had my own agenda and things to do. But that would have been massively exciting in itself, just because of the extreme figures involved in women's cricket. See, it's not just the media now, it's the professionalism, it's the pay, it's that people are investing in women's cricket and women's sport, and that's no longer able to be ignored. Plus, we're having tailored clothing, tailored equipment, all stuff that we could not have dreamed of many years ago when we're wearing those ridiculous skirts and those long socks, totally impractical. And so, it's just changed out of sight. The media has changed out of sight. And of course, it's a different landscape as well in terms of social media and all that kind of thing. But you and I, again, have talked, we're traditionalists. That's why I could have gone massive on my media, but my social media. But first of all, I want to be immersive when I'm going along on my tour. And secondly, to me, the important media for myself is my book. That's where all the stories are going to be. So that's also part of why I chose to go on the tour rather than come back into traditional mainstream cricket journalism per se, because to me, I've always gravitated when it comes to covering women's sport or advocating for women's sport in my local community, etc. I've always gone where I've perceived the need is. Now, how wonderful to see the extent of coverage for the women's cricket these days in the developed cricket nations like England, Australia, India, etc. I felt nobody needs me there. I want to go and see what's going on elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's not just, you know, the extent of the coverage, and not just the extent of coverage of the women's matches. It's also really great to see so many women covering men's cricket so authoritatively and with such respect. I mean, Ali Mitchell has just been, she's a pioneer as well. She's one of my good friends, and we just constantly talk about how everything has changed. And then you look at someone like Isha Gua, who's, you know, funny, composed, knowledgeable, all of this. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to see. But like with everything, there's always room for improvement and there's room for change. But I think the pace at which everything's changing is wonderful, and it's really encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's fantastic to see more females get involved in cricket, in all aspects of cricket. So it's fantastic to hear that. Any tips and advice you would give to young journalists and people who want to get into sports media or broadcasting, or people who want to become an author and write a book if they want to? Any advice you would give for those people?
Okay, well, I think the main advice for all of that is just remain consistent. Just keep going, keep true to what your passion is and where you feel the most energy and excitement. I mean, I was always told you can't be a single sports journalist, and I did work at Sky Sports for several years prior to Cricinfo, covering lots of different sports, but you know, cricket was always the thing that drew me. So I think just remain calm, committed, enthusiastic, and you know, a massive thing is reliability. That's more important than anything. Just keep showing up, keep committed, keep, you know, producing work. It doesn't have to be volumes and volumes, but do it, you know, do quality consistently, and you know, just be polite, be respectful, be grateful. That's a massive thing. When people help you, when people give you experience, be grateful, be polite, and then obviously when you get in that situation, pay it forward yourself. We were talking before that the cricket community does look out for each other, and we do help each other. But yeah, it's an industry like any other. So, you know, just look out for yourself, manage your mental health, because burnout is a real thing. It's an absolute real thing when you get there. And then when it comes to writing a book, I have written several books before. So that in itself has given me the knowledge that I can write this one, because I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of magical thinking when it comes to writing a book, in that you think, oh, I can't do it, or I'm waiting for the inspiration. And anyone who wants to write a book, the book to read, and my friends who are authors, we all would agree on this book, is Stephen King's On Writing. That's the only book you need to read, because I think, again, another trap you can fall into when writing a book is to procrastinate by just buying all the how to write a book books and never then writing yourself because you're waiting to be ready. No, just write. And Stephen King talks about, you know, there's no such thing as waiting for that muse to sit on your shoulder every day. It's not. It's literally bum on seat. Get yourself some bum glue. Like, yes, sure, make yourself an environment where you like to write. Good. But again, everything in life, I think, comes back to consistency. Commit to writing something every day. It doesn't matter if it's not very good, because you can improve on it. And if you've got something out on the paper, you can work with it. But also, I would say, just do it. Just get it done. Because, do you know, everybody thinks they can write a book, but very few people actually do it. And then when people do it, you know, it doesn't matter if it's no good, because they've still achieved something magnificent. And then if it's good, that's, you know, that's almost a bonus, really.
Yes.
But I think, you know, if you've got something to say, do it. I was contacted by a young player in Sweden recently, and she said, I know you're writing a book and I'm going to write one too, on cricket, on women's cricket. I was like, that's fantastic. That's amazing. And she knows she's going to do it, and she will do it, because she has that self-belief. Yeah, I would also say, for writing, if you can find yourself a supportive community, that's really good. I'm a member in South Australia of Writers SA, and they have some really good courses, but more so, I've met some fellow authors within it who, you know, we're always like, how's your book going? Oh, you know, we've got that shared support network, which is really important, because, you know, it's like gym buddies. You need to keep each other accountable, and accountability is massive, because writing can be such a lonely endeavor as well. So it's really cool when you've got friends who understand the position that you're in and are quite happy to sit there going, you know, to the nth degree, discussing something really minute. That's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, life's too short. You know, just do things that you're passionate about and give it a go.
That's it.
You know, if you don't succeed, try again, as the old saying goes. So that's excellent advice there, Jenny. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed hearing Jenny and I discuss Jenny's cricketing journey.